Chapter 1. In the Beginning. I am afraid that while the origin of God is known to me, it's forbidden to be spoken on this plane of existence. What I can say is that God and Satan were created by the same force at the same time, along with a great many other beings. The battle that brought God to power also trapped his surviving brothers and sisters away deep below the bowels of the universe. Hell, as you have come to call it, is simply a giant gateway to where they're housed this very day. Beings of incredible power, crippled and locked away deep below the lowest level of hell. And Satan, being the last to be defeated, was stationed to forever stand frozen atop their eternal tomb to ensure that they would never again return to this realm. While from our perspective God is immeasurably powerful, he is not all-powerful. To win his crown, he created an ultimate weapon, a seat of power that could harness all the power of the force that created the first beings and focus it through him. This weapon would become known to many as the Throne of Heaven. The Throne of Heaven is much more than a mere place to sit. First and foremost, it's a fifth-dimensional construct that, if you were capable of observing it, would appear larger than 150 galaxies, and it's made from all the bones of those first beings who died in the first of all wars. All those bones somehow tapped into the true omnipotent force that created them, and any of the first beings who sits upon it shall gain devout influence over this force. The problem is there is a reason why before the ascension of God that this force had no consciousness, no will, and resided beyond the reach of the universe. It was and is absolute in its power of both creation and destruction for all things. A lesson that God learned all too well after his victory over his brethren. You should know there are rules to the universe that we all must follow, regardless of how powerful we may be. The ultimate rule is that everything must always be in balance. For a force of creation to enter this realm, a force of destruction of compensating value must exist as well. As God was now both of these things at once, everything he created was instantly destroyed by his own power, until he hatched upon a plan. He would make a race of beings imbued with a near absolute power of creation to serve him, while simultaneously creating a force of pure destruction. The beings of creation were called the Omna. They would do the bidding of God and created the whole of heaven and all of its angels at the behest of their creators. Once they were completing this task, God commanded them to go forth and create the universe, a place teeming with life. Hence, they left heaven to go forth and create everything that you know about, and many things that you have yet to discover. The force of destruction was called the Figrio, a black flame that would destroy anything that it touched instantly. As the Omna created, this flame would grow ever larger, deleting the problem with the balance of creation and destruction, and creating the perfect final lock on the cage of hell. God cast the Figrio down to cover the great chasm that led to the prison of the first beings. There it stood, for eons, guarding the gateway to hell, unbeknownst to all but God himself. Now, even for the Omna, creating an entire universe, atom by atom, was a hefty task that took billions of your years. During that time, God had grown rather comfortable in his position in heaven, and began taking for granted that his angels would always be loyal to him. Even without the throne of heaven, his power was far greater than that of any angel, and since only a first being could use the throne of heaven, and all were safely locked away, he really had nothing to fear. Even so, God was careful never to leave the throne unattended. He chose his most loyal angel to guard over the throne while he went to craft a great and grand reward for the Omna to be presented to them upon their return to heaven. Without the power of the throne of heaven, God was indeed capable of creation, and he crafted a wondrous world full of beauty and life, marvelous animals to roam the land, sea and sky, amazing landscapes, fields full of colorful flowers, fruits, vegetables, mountains up high and valleys that sunk deep below. Such exquisiteness had never been seen before, and even in all the wonders of heaven. A splendid and magnificent place crafted slowly and meticulously by the hand of the Most High. This was a place of absolute perfection that God called Eden. Crafting a whole world takes a lot of time, you see. And considering that God was crafting a perfect world by his own hand, in his spare time, this meant that he had to trust one of his angels greatly to repeatedly task him with guarding his throne. Over time, a great love and an abundance of trust was formed between God and this angel. So much so that he revealed the secret of his creation, the existence of hell, and its purpose in keeping the first beings out of this realm. The Omna were gone from heaven for so long that their very existence was nearly forgotten by all the angels. But indeed, one day they did return, the grandest of all tasks complete. They had created a universe capable of producing stars and planets capable of producing and supporting life. Indeed, they had surpassed all expectations and even created a universe that expanded and contracted to renew itself again and again. The Omna's job was one that was very well done. The Omna's arrival was indeed a great surprise to many, as they were gone so long that even among the immortal beings of heaven they had become little more than legend. Their reception was such that had never been seen before or since. The whole host of heaven stopped to think, welcome, and bow down before the Omna, for they were the creators of all things known to them. God himself showed up to praise and rejoice in the return of the Omna, and he bestowed upon them great and multitudinous honors, culminating in the greatest of all gifts ever given by God, his perfect creation, Eden. With all the angels in attendance, God decreed the Omna were the greatest of all creations, and commanded that all the angels who served him would now yield to the commands of the Omna as well. As commanded, all the angels bowed their heads to the Omna and swore to serve them as they would their God. With that done, the Omna went forth to claim their prize, this planet called Eden. The Omna were now not only creators, but also masters of the universe, and were to be treated with the same level of dignity and respect as God himself. Yet, there was great unrest among some of the angels regarding the stature of the Omna. Rightly so. These beings just showed up as far as they were concerned, and suddenly they were to be their masters? These angels had been devout and loyal to God since their creation, serving him in his interest since the very beginning, and none were granted freedom or any of the privileges the Omna now enjoyed. Yet, since none of them could use the power of the throne, their anger towards God remained silent. For when he sat upon the throne of heaven, his power was absolute. As time went on, the Omna created great cities in Eden, and enjoyed this place of their rule. As with any kingdom, a power structure was formed, and the greatest of the Omna all reside in the capital, simply called the Garden. Their king would roam the garden, and God would come and speak with him. Indeed, Their world was one of absolute beauty and perfection. God's trips to Eden were largely kept secret, except from his most loyal and most beloved angel, who guarded over the throne in his absence. This angel is the one you call Lucifer. Despite his love of God, he was greatly offended that these Omna were granted such rights, while he was entrusted with guarding the secrets of God himself. Lucifer alone knew the truth, that there was indeed one being left in all the universe with the ability to take the throne of heaven. And with the growing unrest over the position of the Omna, he felt he might finally have the support to release him from the prison that God had cast him into so long ago. Unbeknownst to God, Lucifer sent out angelic scouts to find the entrance to hell, while God was away tending to the Omna. Long after the search began, a scout came to Lucifer and told him that he had found the entrance to hell, yet there was no way to release Satan. The Pharaoh covered the expanse of the abyss, and it would instantly destroy anything that touched it. Nothing could penetrate this force of destruction. This did not concern Lucifer, who knew of the Pharaoh. The next time God left his throne, Lucifer tore off a sliver of one of the bones that composed it, and raced towards the entrance to the abyss. When he reached the entrance to hell, he plunged the sliver of bone into the Pharaoh, creating a small opening. Lucifer knew that the Pharaoh could not destroy even a piece of the throne, for the throne was a force of both creation and destruction, and you cannot destroy destruction. The bit of bone Lucifer brought with him created an opening, yes, but one not nearly large enough for him to get through. He could only call out to Satan and hope for a response. Satan had stood in silence and darkness for so long that Lucifer's voice rightly startled him. When he regained his composure, he called out to Lucifer, asking to be released from his prison. The sheer force of Satan's voice was incredible upon the angelic ears of Lucifer, and he then knew that he had indeed found the one who could rival God. Lucifer asked how he could possibly release Satan from his prison behind the Pharaoh. Satan told Lucifer to destroy the Omna. As beings of pure creation, if the Omna died off, so too will the Pharaoh, to keep the balance in the universe. And once the Pharaoh was removed, Satan would finally be free to claim the throne of heaven as his own, and restore his banished brethren to their rightful place in his kingdom. To destroy the Omna, Satan sent what bit of power he could through the hole Lucifer had created, and wrapped the flames of the Pharaoh around the bone, carving it into a flaming sword. Satan told Lucifer to take the sword and destroy every Omna in existence. Once the flame on the sword went out, he would know that all the Omna were gone, and Satan would continue his fight and claim the throne of heaven for all that had fallen by the hand of God. For his aid, Lucifer and all who followed him would be granted the kingdom of Eden, and would have all the dignities and honors given to the Omna. Lucifer raced back to heaven in the hopes that his absence had gone unnoticed by God, and indeed it had. God was still among his beloved Omna. Realizing that there was still time, he launched his campaign and gained the aid of many of the angels of heaven to release Satan and wipe the Omna from existence. He handed the flaming sword to the angel Paimon, who would serve as his general. And once God returned to heaven, the plan would go into action. God returned to heaven much later, and the plans for his descent were all laid out. Upon his return, the armies of Lucifer descended upon Eden and destroyed virtually all the Omna before God could take his seat upon the throne. All the Omna, except one, the king of Eden. The angels surrounded this king, known only as the guardian of the garden Omna. But he was too fast and strong for them to take on, even with all their numbers. The guardian snatched a flaming sword from Paimon and looked upon all the angels who had so heartily slaughtered all those he had vowed to protect. Then he looked upon the once lush fields of Eden, where his Omna had once laughed, sang, and played, now barren and lifeless. Then he let out a great cry that rattled the universe up into the highest reaches of heaven. The angels were terrified. No one could have foreseen that one among the Omna could be this powerful. The guardian fell to his knees, realizing that upon his first true test as the guardian of his kingdom, he had failed. As penance, he turned the sword towards himself and pierced his heart with the flame, killing him instantly, leaving behind nothing but a pile of ash. The cry of the guardian had indeed been heard by God, who raced to the aid of the Omna, but his arrival came all too late. By the time God had arrived, all the Omna had been destroyed. Not killed, but obliterated from existence by the renegade angels. His rage and grief were awesome, and it seeped into Eden. The sky turned black, great forests turned into deserts. In an instant, this paradise that God had spent eons meticulously crafted became tarnished beyond all recognition. When God looked upon the angels, his rage changed him into a monstrous form. His skin became hard and black like onyx, his hands were as claws, and his mouth spat out flames. Once God saw the weapon that the angels had used to destroy the Omna, the sword still flaming with the Figrio, he realized just what was happening. God picked up the sword and raced back to the throne, knowing that at any moment his position in the universe could soon be overtaken. God's fears were indeed well-founded. In the time it took for him to descend to Eden, Lucifer had sent a whole garrison of angels to hasten the rise of Satan to the throne of heaven. By the time God made it back to the throne room, Satan was already climbing into the throne, ready to claim the power of the ultimate force as his own, and reclaim all that was stripped from him and his kin by God. Yet, God knew one thing that Satan did not. The Figrio was not all destroyed. And what was left of it was clasped in the right hand of God, wrapped around the sword that Satan himself had carved to ensure God's defeat. God leapt across the room and landed at Satan's feet as Satan was about to claim the throne. Just as Satan's victory seemed assured, a sharp, burning pain ran through the sole of his foot, and he stumbled and fell to the ground. God had stabbed him with a sword, and as soon as Satan hit the ground, God climbed over his body and into the throne of heaven once again. With God on the throne, his power was once again absolute. In moments, Satan was again trapped in hell, but this time, he had company. All the angels that had slaughtered the Omna were sent there along with him. As for the rest of his angels, God looked deep into each one's heart and found all of his betrayers. Those who had plotted against him in heaven were to take a solemn, unbreakable oath of loyalty to the throne of heaven, then were cast down to the deepest reaches of the universe to take the place of the Figaro, and forever ensure that nothing would ever again escape from hell. Lucifer, being the leader of the revolt, would also lead these angels to ensure that all in hell were rightly punished for their sins against God. You might think this is the end of the story, and perhaps it should have been. But you forget, there must always be balance in the universe. The sword still flamed with the Figaro. This meant the Omna could not have been entirely destroyed. As much as God wanted to find what remained of the Omna himself, he now feared leaving the throne. God used the wisdom that the throne provided him to find the most trustworthy angel in all of heaven, the one whom you call Michael. To Michael, God handed over the flaming sword and commanded him to go to Eden to find what remained of the Omna and restore them to their glory. As the ever-dutiful angel, Michael did as he was commanded and left for Eden, his sword in hand. When Michael arrived, he saw the destruction that had visited this place that was once considered paradise, even among the residents of heaven. Nothing was as it should have been. The world was utterly destroyed. All except for the garden. The garden had been spared the rage of God, and this was where Michael decided it best to begin his search for the remains of the Omna. In his meticulous search, he came upon the pile of ash that was once the guardian of the garden Omna, and recognized it for what it was. As Michael was altered, he breathed new life into the ashes, not realizing that the sands of Eden had become intermixed with the ashes that still contained just a hint of the Figaro that created them. Just as Michael thought his task was completed, an entirely new race emerged from the ashes. This race, which would eventually become humanity. The first race ever born in perfect balance on its own. Humanity was composed of destruction and creation, yet bound to the realm of Eden by the sands. Michael was wholly ashamed of this creation and planned to swiftly destroy it before God saw this wretch that he had brought forth and start again from their ashes. Yet, just as he raised his sword, another angel appeared before him. This one you have come to know as Camiel. Camiel beckoned Michael to halt his task, for God had seen this thing called humanity, and through it, he could once again restore the balance that had been ripped from the universe by Lucifer's attack. In humanity, there stood the ingredients to restore all that had been taken. The Omna, the Figaro, and Eden. God had formed a plan. He would allow humanity to live and propagate the land once known as Eden, until a time came that the three emerged pure from this awful hybrid. Once those three beings were created by humanity, Michael would return with the armies of heaven behind him to purify the land of humanity once and for all. thus restoring the armor to the paradise they had been given by God, and forever locking away hell and all its inhabitants from ever entering this world again. The fact is, until the three emerge from humanity, it simply isn't safe for God to leave the throne of heaven, since it's only by the power of the throne that Satan does not break free of his bonds and Lucifer is bound to his vow. So there God sits, even on to this very day, waiting for the three so he can be free of the prison that he created for himself. So at this point you're probably asking, where do I fit into all of this? Well, I am getting to that part. What you need to know now is that in the beginning, God only saw humanity as a means to an end and held little love for you. You were to God as nothing more than a petri dish of genetic material, one that will one day bring forth the pure three elements of its creation. This is why beauty is so highly treasured in humanity, for beauty is brought forth by Eden. Warmongers are praised as heroes, for this comes from the Figaro, and scientists and inventors are honored, for this comes from the Omna. Once these elements emerge from humanity purified, God would find no more use for you and you were to be destroyed. I do apologize if any of that offended you, but I simply felt it was time that the truth was spoken. You see, up until now I have been the lone force among you working to prevent the impending destruction of the human race. So, just who am I and why should I even care about you? That is a very big question indeed. So, please, allow me to explain.